Indian cricket has been blessed to have some great moments over the years, ever since it first made its appearance on the international stage way back in 1932 as a Test cricket nation. From there on, we have had some great captains, some great batsmen and bowlers over the years, and we have been able to have some great moments on the field and backed by some able administrators of the field. In such a scenario, to come up with a book which talks about 50 greatest moments of Indian cricket would be an absolute challenge for the authors. But today, that is what I have today to have an author with me who has been able to take on this challenge. I have with me Mr. Titash Banerjee, author and co-author of Spins, Sixes and Surprises, the 50 great iconic moments of Indian cricket or matches. So welcome Titash on the SNS Cricket Diaries show.
Thank you, Siddharth. Great to be here.
Thank you. And Titash Banerjee is a quizmaster, entrepreneur, and a true knowledge explorer. He has been actively involved with the world of quizzing for more than 10 years now. He has hosted many events, including the Star Mark Open Sports Quiz, the Cycle Heritage Quiz on Indian Heritage for Schools, the Nairobi Rotary Quiz Night, and many more. He made his debut as an author with the Ultimate IPL Quiz book from Rupa Publications. He has also been a keen theatre person and has acted in plays. After working with two multinational companies, he started his own knowledge services venture, Gyaanspace, who have been the primary content providers for CRICIQ, the biggest ever online cricket quiz organized by ESPN Cricket. He is currently based in Bangalore. So, with that wonderful introduction of yours, Titash, I welcome you once again to the SNS Cricket Diaries. Thank you so much for sparing your time out here.
Thank you so much, Siddharth. Great to be here and honored to be part of this podcast.
So, Titash, we will get into the book in a while, but I would like
Sure.
to start this interview by asking you that when did you first start watching cricket? What were your first impressions? Who were your first major heroes?
My first memory of cricket is first for everyone born in the mid 80s is the 1992 Cricket World Cup played in Australia. And the first match that I remember watching was India versus England at Perth, where young Sachin Tendulkar, who was I think 18 years old at that point of time, took on the likes of Botham and De Freitas. He played a short innings; it was not very long. It was around 35 runs he scored. But in that also you could see the array of strokes and how comfortable he was with the pace and bounce of a very fast Australian pitch. And what I clearly remember about that match was that you had this partnership between him and Krishnamachari Srikanth, where actually Srikanth got inspired by Sachin's bravado and also started to take on the English bowlers on that very fast and bouncy pitch. Of course, India went on to lose that match. It was a very close match, but that is my first memory of cricket. And then, of course, I have been a lifelong cricket fan. And in terms of heroes, yes, in 1996 we had that great Lord's Test match where Saurabh Ganguly and also Rahul Dravid made their debut. Since then, of course, I've followed both of them, and both of them, of course, accompanied Sachin Tendulkar to form the big three, and then, of course, it became the big four, and then big five of the Indian batting during that entire era from the late 90s to the mid 2000s, and in fact into the late 2000s as well. So, of course, Rahul Dravid and Saurav Ganguly were also two people who I followed very closely. In terms of non-Indian players, I think my favorite of all time has to be Adam Gilchrist because he completely revolutionized the role of a wicketkeeper, especially in the Test matches, where at number 7 you had someone who can come and completely tear apart the opposition attack, and I think that was probably the key factor in making Australia so dominant. In the early 2000s, where Adam Gilchrist came in. Of course, Ian Healy was also a legendary wicketkeeper, but Adam Gilchrist, the threat that he posed at number 7, and along with that being such a competent wicketkeeper, really redefined the way we look at wicket keepers. So the expectation of a wicket keeper that he should be able to bat, he should be able to score hundreds, and in some cases even be among the better batsmen in the 11 was set by Adam Gilchrist. So these are the few people who I grew up watching and who I followed very closely.
Wonderful. And if I take you back even further now, because you have written this book about, it could be said as a history of Indian cricket, no? So what?
Yeah.
Uh, so could you tell us what did we lack as a cricket nation during the first 30 to 40 years of our existence as a cricket nation?
Yeah, so essentially, we could talk about Indian cricket. We have talked about Indian cricket since 1896. So we have started off with Ranjit Singh's debut. Of course, Ranjit Singh never played for India, but he played for England. But even then, he had to face a bit of racism where there were objections raised in terms of him making his debut because he was not uh, English per se, you
Mhm.
know. So, but in terms of what we lack, we will come to that later on. Uh, what we lacked as a cricketing nation, first basic thing was infrastructure. Like nowadays, when you watch, say, IPL matches, you see these lush green outfields, but that you did not have in India for a very long time. Even like going to the 90s, if you see the outfields of India and you compare that with, say, Australia or England, see, like diving was such a hazardous issue, so for example, why didn't we have great fielders, and why was someone like, say, Azharuddin so special in that era? Is because diving itself was difficult, so you could hurt yourself. So that's why kids, when we played cricket during our childhood, we were afraid to dive, and
Right.
it was never ingrained into us, and that is like a necessary thing that you need to do. Apart from that, of course, the belief that we can compete with the best of the world. So if you see the matches that, say, for example, India and Pakistan played during the early stages of the rivalry, there were so many draws. So you could see that there was this fear of losing, and when you even when India played the other countries, even while playing at home, there were a severe amount of draws that were happening. That's why that whole urge of winning. So when we say drew a test match against, say, Australia or England, we used to feel that it's like a moral victory for us. So that belief that today's generation has, that we can compete with the best in the world, was lacking. Of course, in terms of popularity also, if you see before the 1983 Cricket World Cup, it was not, you know in cricket was not undisputed the number one sport in the country. You could not say that it was easily the number one sport in the country, because there were some sections, like, say, even West Bengal or Goa or Kerala, where you could say football was the number one sport. Now, even frankly speaking, if you some diehard people are going to say football is still the number one sport in those era. But let's if you look at TRPs, if you look at if you just take a survey, I'm sure cricket will be the number one sport. So that emphasis on cricket was also lacking. So now, as a nation, we have completely gone behind the sport, and that's why every corporate is putting money into this sport. The BCCI has become the most powerful body in world cricket. So that is, of course, beneficial for Indian cricket as well. So that whole emphasis towards cricket, infrastructure, and most importantly, I feel, with respect to on-field performances, the belief was lacking in the first 30, 40 years. Because if you see, it took us 20 years from us being a test nation to us getting our first ever test victory.
Mm.
1952 was when we won our first test match. 1932 was when we actually debuted in test cricket,
All right.
right? And it took us till 1968 for us to win our first overseas test
Mm.
series. In fact, overseas test win also. Even the first overseas test win
Mm.
also was on that tour to New Zealand, where Pataudi's leadership led us to that 3-1 test series.
Right, right. Very interesting, fascinating. So, Titash, if I come to the book that you have co-authored, called "Of Spins, Sixes, and Surprises," co-authored with Mr. Shom Biswas, it's a
Yeah.
fascinating title of that you have for the book. So, how did you come up with the idea of writing this book, Titash?
Right. So, of course, I have to first thank my publishers, Rupa Publications, for giving us the opportunity to present this book. So, Shomda and me, we have, of course, been friends for a very long time, and we have been united by a love for quizzing as well as for sport. And over one day over coffee, I think at Glenn's Bakehouse in Ranagar, we were discussing ideas of writing a book together because Shomda has been a published author before. I mean, not exactly as a book author, but as a columnist in the Indian Express. He has written detective fiction, and he also follows sport as well as cricket very closely. So we came up with this idea, and we wanted to write something, on the history of Indian cricket. But of course, there has been plenty of books on the history of Indian cricket. We cannot deny that. But what we wanted to write was something from a fan's perspective. And one book that both of us have read was a book on the greatest ever test matches. That was mainly, it was written in the 1970s, I guess, and it followed test cricket from the 1870s to the 1960s. And it had mostly matches between England, South Africa, West Indies, and Australia. But that was a book that we really liked because it portrayed the matches. The matches were described in detail, the main characters, the scorecards, the main statistics of the matches, and why that match was important. So that book really inspired us. So we thought that something like that doesn't exist for Indian cricket, and Indian cricket now has such a rich history in various formats.
Mhm.
And as cricket fans, matches gives us a very nice way to look at the history of Indian cricket. So we portray cricket through these matches. We don't just write a very academic history of Indian cricket. We we do a fan's perspective because what do fans remember about cricket? Fans will probably not remember cricket history through great books or like large discourses. They will remember cricket through the moments, right?
Mhm.
And the
Mhm.
moments occurred in matches, right? So
Mhm.
that's why we wanted to portray this kind of history of Indian cricket, where we of course go in chronological order. We trace the evolution of Indian cricket, but at the center of them are these 50 matches which we thought defined Indian cricket.
Wonderful. And what challenges did you face, Titash, you along with your co-author, Mr. Shom Biswas, in writing this book? Could you tell us a little bit about that?
Sure. So basically, one of the main things about this book is it's written from a fan's perspective. And from a fan's perspective, it is very important to portray the emotions that the authors felt while going through these matches or watching these matches. Of course, to portray the emotions of matches where we have not watched is of course a challenge, right? Of course, we were not alive when Ranjit Singh ji made his debut, right? But of course, we have gone through cricket literature, we have gone through various interviews that famous authors and researchers have made, and you know tried to find out or tried to imbibe what this match meant for Indian cricket, right? So, for example, Ranjit Singh making his debut in 1996 and then going on to score 100. We kind of set the stage for Indian cricket in the future because Ranjit Singh, don't forget, was also the selector when the first Indian Test team to England in 1932 was selected, right? And of course, he was an influential figure in Indian cricket in the future. And we kind of say that what if there was this person, Ranjit Singh ji, who did not play cricket, you know,
Mhm.
what if he played for say Arsenal or Newcastle, and won the FA Cup for them? Would India have been a footballing nation, right?
Mhm.
So we
Mhm.
raised that question in the very first chapter of our book, which is called Ranji Wizardry, right? But to come up with a way to uh, you know have the narrative of these old matches was of course a challenge. Of course, we have that. Good thing is, due to the internet, due to the fact that both of us are sports book holders, both me and Shomda, we have enough literature to go on.
Mhm.
But definitely, the portraying the emotions of the older matches it was a challenge. Uh, Even for example, you look at the second match, for example, the Balu's uh, main match, which is the match against Leicestershire in 1911, where he toured with the Maharaja of Patiala's team,
Mhm.
where he took 11 wickets and beat Leicestershire. For that, we don't have too much of history available. We just have a scorecard, but to research and see, some snippets of interviews of players about that particular match, and to garner information about that match, to see the background of that match, or also, the scorecards of the other matches on the tour, so that we can give the readers a bit of context, the fact that why this particular match is the one we have chosen rather than the other matches, and what was the significance of that particular tour. So the older matches definitely was a challenge. Of course, the more recent ones, a lot of them we have watched. Actually, most all of them we have
Mm.
watched. From say, so I'm a bit younger than Shobda, but so between the two of us, I think all the matches from 1985 onwards were matches that both of us have watched. So of course, doing the research on the older matches was and portraying the emotions that were felt by the spectators
Mhm.
during the older matches was definitely a challenge.
Interesting. And one of the moments that you mention in your in the book is the first ever Ranji Trophy final. You know,
Yes,
and,
yeah,
so could you, because I think nowadays when we, especially in light of today's cricket and recently the fact that the BCCI had to discard national contracts of two players because of their alleged unwillingness to
yeah.
play the Ranji Trophy. So, in light of that, if you could tell us a little bit about how it was, to host the first ever Ranji Trophy final, and what were the moments? I mean, the emotions that time amongst the players, because cricket wasn't big that time, but to have what will later turn out to be the pinnacle of Indian domestic cricket. So, how do you view that first ever Ranji Trophy final in your book?
So, in terms of the first Ranji Trophy final, one of the key characters there was, of course, Vijay Merchant. So, the chapter itself is called Merchant of Excellence, who scored, Vijay Merchant scored a 120 in the match in the second innings.
Hmm.
And he actually also did a few good things with the ball. It was a match between Bombay and Northern India. And of course, it kind of set the ball rolling for Bombay's dominance in Indian domestic cricket during that time. But one major thing why the Ranji Trophy was significant was that cricket before that was essentially kind of a power struggle between various royals, So even when the first test team to India was selected, remember there was no Ranji Trophy then in 1932, right? So it was a power struggle between the Maharaja of Patiala,
Hmm.
Maharaja of Vizianagaram, and then ultimately Maharaja Porbandar was selected as the captain of that tour, right? Of course, to the benefit of Indian cricket, Maharaja Porbandar, about whom it is said that he had more Rolls Royces than runs on that particular trip. He decided to step down, and then even the vice captain Ghanshyam Limdi also decided to step down from that match, and then CK Naidu ultimately became the captain. But essentially, the power struggle between the royals who kind of defined Indian cricket, that was one part. The other part, the second part, which was very prominent in Indian cricket, was the pentang, which ultimately turned out to be the pentangular tournament, which was essentially a tournament where the teams were divided on religious grounds, right? So Hindus, Muslims, Parsis, the rest, and the Europeans, right? These were the five teams which ultimately uh, played in the pentangular, and even there were when India was going through the whole freedom movement, you had this whole. There were some parties who were objection. Of course, the freedom fight. There were some freedom fighters who had objected to that tournament as well because it kind of divided people on religious grounds. So during that time, I thought even in the socio-political context of India, it was very important to have a tournament which was away from this whole religious perspective. Right? So you finally had states, or of course, in that during that period, you had these princely states also, which were represented, like say Navanagar and Holkar and the likes. So it was very important to have a tournament which was, of course, apart from this whole religious divide. So for a while, definitely, you could still say that the pentangular was considered the pinnacle of Indian cricket. So you still have those great partnerships, in the pentangular, with performances by Vijay Hazare and Vijay Merchant in the pentangular being talked about.
Hmm.
But slowly but surely, especially post independence, the Ranji Trophy did become the number one tournament in India because, of course, the pentangular ceased to exist. But it was very important that in 1934 a start was made, and BCCI also was its infancy. If you realize, BCCI was formed in 1928. In fact, and it was very important for to have a representative tournament of the BCCI as well. That that was kind of one of the tournaments that BCCI could say, okay, this is something of ours. So I think that's about very important. Ranji Trophy final, the first one definitely. In terms of a match, yeah, if you look at the scorecards, for example, yes, Bombay scored 266, and then Northern India scored 219, and then Bombay scored 300 in the second innings, and Northern India got out for 139 all out. So it was not a very close contest per se, if you look at the match. But the significance of the tournament itself was so great, which would be realized much later. It
Mm.
would be realized much later. Incidentally, the trophy for the Ranji Trophy was donated by the Maharaja of Patiala, Bhupinder Singh, and yeah, so because the Ranji Trophy now is a very important tournament, and I think I'm quite happy to see that the board and uh, the team management also is looking at Ranji Trophy as a very key uh, criteria for selection in Test cricket, especially. I do not think that they would look at it for the other formats, but definitely Test cricket, Ranji Trophy is a very good criteria for selection. And if you look at all the players that have been selected in recent times and have done well, for example, Devdutt Padikkal in the last Test match, he played. He he was not selected on basis of IPL performances, right? So he had very good Ranji Trophy season before that. Sarfaraz Khan finally gets selected after scoring such a plethora of runs,
Mm.
in the Ranji Trophy for so many years. And it's good to see the current team management and the current selection panel actually recognizing these Ranji Trophy performances, right?
Right. Right. Interesting, interesting, Titash. And now, as I mentioned at the top of the show, that it's very difficult amongst the richness of the Indian cricket that we have and its history to come up with 50 moments. So I would
Yeah.
like to mention three of your favorite moments out of the 50 that have been included in the book, and as well as which are the moments that you feel could have been added to the list but did not make the cut for whatever reason.
Yeah, so three favorite moments. Of course, the one closest to my heart is Sachin's last Test match at
Hmm.
Wankhede. As a match, it was a no contest, right?
Hmm.
We all remember that. It was India won by an Indians. Rohit Sharma hit a century. Cheteshwar Pujara hit a century. Pradyan Oja became man of the match. That was the last Test match he played. So as a match, it wasn't anything to write home about. But the whole emotion that the entire country felt during that match. I cried when Sachin retired.
Hmm.
I cried when Sachin gave that last speech. In fact, that last speech probably is the most significant part of that match.
Yeah.
The entire celebrity, Bollywood, whole congregation came during that match to watch Sachin's last Test match. Sachin's mother finally came to watch him.
Yeah.
A special ramp was created for her.
Oh,
You
wow.
know, so the whole emotion that the entire country felt. You know, and I remember going to office late that day, the
Hmm.
day Sachin came out to bat. So I think he was on 36 not out
Hmm.
going into the next day, where he
Hmm.
finally got out for 74. So I remember, going to office only after Sachin got out. You know,
Hmm.
so so that match kind of encapsulated what Sachin meant for us.
Yeah.
Because uh, we all know. I think you would have also felt it that when Sachin used to get out in the mid 90s in any match, we used to switch off the televisions,
Yeah.
right? So, and maybe when Sachin scored 100, the next day we will go to our schools and be in a good mood and
Yeah.
talk about cricket and be happy. And I'm sure the people who went to the office during that day felt the same emotion.
Hmm.
So that whole match, when again the country stood at was at a standstill for Sachin, because the Sachin for the country being at a standstill for Sachin, that whole emotion that had kind of disappeared over the last 10 years because so many other cricketers had come up. Indian cricket had achieved success, the T20 World Cup, the 2011 World Cup. But just for that one individual, the country being at a standstill, had kind of gone away. But then again, that last test match happened. And again, we had that same figurehead, that small, heighted gentleman, keeping the entire country on its tenterhooks. People rejoicing at every straight drive he made and everything. And then that gasp of silence when he finally got out to Narsingh Devannayak with Darren Sammy picking up that catch. So that the whole emotion that I feared during that match, thankfully, I believe I was able to, put forward that in the book. And I titled that chapter as "Do Not Go Gentle into That Good Night,"
Mhm.
which is a poem by Dylan Thomas, and the uh, so that was my tribute to my favorite cricketer, Sachin Tendulkar, and that was also the book that we submitted as a sample article to Rupa Publications for their approval, and that kind of helped us give their sanction to write this book. So that was my favorite chapter. Then one chapter that I really like, that of course is not a match I have watched, is the chapter about CK Naidu's innings of 153, if I'm not wrong, uh, against MCC 11 in 1926. It was a it was a team captained by Arthur Gilligan, and that's where Naidu hit a huge number of sixes. It was at the Bombay Gymkhana ground. This was kind of the match which impressed Arthur Gilligan, who was a very influential figure in English cricket at that point of time, and that's kind of set the ball rolling for the formation of the BCCI. And ultimately India's ascent into Test cricket. So that showed, that particular match. It showed the world that what an Indian can do on the cricket field. That he can take take on the best in the world in terms of bowling. So if you had former English fast bowler Morris State also part of that 11 with CK Naidu played against. So that match kind of stamped his authority as probably the first superstar of Indian cricket, or first Indian superstar of cricket, because first Ranjit Singh Ji was there, but he never played for India. So, but this was the person who would ultimately go on to represent India, and he'll be the figurehead for Indian cricket for a few years. So, and of course, India's first ever captain. So that match was very significant, and I think it's very important to portray that match and convey to the readers what that match means for Indian cricket, because that's not something we really talk about. We talk about India's first Test match, we talk about India's first win, we talk about the World Cup victory, but a match which was essentially a first class match, not an international match, before India achieved Test status, is something that we kind of ignore. But it is very important for a person interested in Indian history to know about that match. So just to tell you the summary of that book, of that match rather. So MCC scored 363 all out, with Earl scoring 130, Sandham 52, and the Hindus scored 356, and Naidu scored 153. And the match was of course drawn, and Naidu really stood out in that match. I mean, he was of course known as a very swashbuckling batter and a very flamboyant batter, and he completely justified that reputation during that match, and he hit a total of 11 sixes, which was unthinkable during those days. So that match was very significant. Apart from that, the third match that I would like to talk about. So this book not only talks about you know uh, great victories of Indian cricket, but also heartbreaks, which turns out to be watershed moments. So without knowing about the heartbreaks, we kind of probably, as a cricket follower, we may not be able to appreciate the victories. So for example, when we talk about India Pakistan rivalry, my most joyous memory, I feel, is Sachin Tendulkar's 98 in 2003 in Centurion, right? But to appreciate the impact of that, and if you remember that after that particular match, India has dominated Pakistan. In all their matches. Of course, we don't play Pakistan that frequently, but still, whenever we play in an ICC tournament, or we even play in these Asia Cup, most of the time we have dominated Pakistan. So, and it has happened since that 2003 match. But to appreciate that match, we need to talk about the previous phase from 1986 onwards, where Pakistan actually used to dominate India. Apart from the World Cup matches, if you see, Pakistan always had an edge over India from the late 80s to the entire 90s, where as a very hardcore Indian fan, also I would have to admit that the Pakistan side of the 90s was a much superior side to India. I mean, if you look at the pace attack, Wasim Akram, Waqar Yunus, then spinners, Saqlain Mushtaq, Mushtaq Ahmed, the batters, we talk about the pride in Indian batting, right? But at that time, they had like Inzamam ul Haq, Mohammad Yusuf, Saeed Anwar, Amir Sohail, before that, Javed Mianda, Salim Malik, and that Javed Mianda six, in against India, where he hit Chetan Sharma for that last ball six. That's a match we have talked about, the final of the Australasia Cup in 1986, where the psychological impact of that match was very long term. Because if you see, India versus Pakistan at Sharjah then
Mhm.
became a very one-sided rivalry.
Mhm.
Before that 86 match, India had beaten Pakistan many times at Sharjah. So, for
Mhm.
example, there was this match where India scored 125 all out and
Mhm.
then got out Pakistan, Imran Khan taking six for 14. But then Pakistan were dismissed for 87 all out, right?
Mhm.
But after that match where Javed Miandad hit Chetan Sharma for six,
Mhm.
almost all the time, you know, it was Pakistan beating India in Sharjah. Except probably that one match, there are a couple of matches I remember where India beat Pakistan. That was one of them where was, of course, there was a match in 1996
Mhm.
where I think where Navjot Singh Sidhu and Sachin Tendulkar both scored hundreds,
Mhm.
and then in the last over, Azharuddin hit Ataur Rahman for more than 25 runs, if I
Yeah.
remember correctly. So, but those were like very, very rare.
Yeah.
Most of the time, the matches I remember were like Wasim Akram and Waqar Yunus running through India through reverse swing, or Saklain Mushtaq bamboozling the Indian lineup, and then, you know, Pakistan chasing the total with ease, or Pakistan defending totals with ease. So, again, to appreciate the dominance that India has had over Pakistan in recent times, it's very important to remember the heartbreak that
Mhm.
happened in 86. So, these are the three chapters that are my favorites: the 1986 Australia Cup final, the 1926 match between the Hindus and Arthur Gilligan's 11, and of course Sachin Tendulkar's last Test match. In
Right.
terms of the matches that probably could have made the list, but are not, there are very obvious two ones which come to mind, and both were or are world records. One of them is a world record still. One is, of course, Rohit Sharma's 264. Where
Mhm.
as a match, again, it's not a huge spectacle, but just the significance of that record. One person scoring 264 runs in a one-day innings at the Eden Gardens. Rohit Sharma against Sri Lanka at the Eden Gardens in 2014, if I'm not wrong.
Mhm. Yeah.
So that was one match that, of course, I remember, which was in an initial short list. So initially we had a list of 100, then that 100 became 75, and then it became 50. So we, of course, had a tough time. That was the challenge, of course, to sort out the 50 matches which will best portray
Mhm.
the Indian cricket history. But yes, Rohit Sharma 264, that particular match, and of course, one match which a lot of the older generation have objected that why this is not there. This should be in the. I was having a talk on my book
Mhm.
recently, and one person said that this should have been in the top five rather than it's not even made the top 50. This was the match where India chased down 406. India scored 406 in the fourth innings to beat the West Indies at Port of Spain. So that particular match should have been there, but
Mhm.
we kind of had to omit it because of the other matches that we felt were more appropriate.
Mhm.
In fact, the funny part is, because we talk about heartbreaks, one thing I would like to point out, or this is my feeling, that if there was a match, or if there was a history of West Indies cricket where we had to write about 50 significant matches of West Indies cricket,
Mhm.
that particular match where India chased 406 or scored 406 in the fourth innings is very significant there. Probably it would be included there because after that match, Clive Lloyd realized that spin is not our strength. There's no need to have spinners. You know, Even if it is a slow pitch, we will have these four fast bowlers and demolish the opposition. So
Mhm.
after that particular match where India scored 406 in the fourth innings, that's what they did. And
Mhm.
then it had a decade long domination where the West Indian pace battery terrorized
Yeah.
batters from all over the world. So these are two matches that could have
Mhm.
been there, but unfortunately are not.
Yeah. Well, yeah, interesting because even I feel that that probably could have been included in this list because it was a watershed moment, I think, in Indian cricket. But yeah, as I said at the top show, it would have been a very tough choice for you and Mr. Shom Biswas to come up because we have had such a great history. So yeah, I mean, fascinating, Titash. Thank you so much for these moments that you have shared about Indian cricket. And moving forward towards the last question of this interview, as we see that such a rich history of Indian cricket has been written by various authors, both Indians as well as foreigners. However, what do you think is the importance of literature of Indian cricket for an average Indian fan, and what would be some of the other books that you could recommend for a person who is interested genuinely in reading more about Indian cricket?
See, cricket literature is very important for the fan because to appreciate, I feel to appreciate the present, you need
Mhm,
to appreciate the past. You know? So it is very important as a fan, I feel, to have a perspective while, say, watching cricket or say, because as a fan, Indian fans are so engaged in cricket. So when we watch something, say even the IPL match, so we criticize, we make comments, we are very active on social media. So, captain should have done this, captain should have done that. But if we don't have the historical perspective, you
mhm,
know, often these comments or these opinions are misinformed opinions. You know, so we talk about, for example, uh, that India chokers in ICC tournaments. Well, I mean, from 2007 to 2013, we won three tournaments, right?
mhm,
And so it is important to know about that. So, but not only statistics, with that you can get to stats through to appreciate how Indian cricket has grown, how Indian cricket has affected society. How people's lives have been transformed due to Indian cricket or the growth of Indian cricket. Uh, it is very important to know about the past. It's very important to uh, garner the perspective of people who have seen the game for a number of years, and also as a viewer or as a cricket lover, it's fascinating to know all these perspectives, to know about the matches of the past. So I feel, you know cricket literature makes cricket viewing also very enriching for the fan as a whole. And in terms of books that I would recommend, and of course books that we have referred to also while writing this book, of course, seminal works by Ramchandra Guha. This is, of course, Corner of a Foreign Field, which is a must read for every cricket lover. Uh, it talks about cricket from uh, the times of Balu. Balu is, we talked about Palwankar Balu, who was basically a Dalit and an untouchable, who considered an untouchable during those times. Of course, that's not a politically correct word, and neither it should have been, but it talks about him in detail, his importance, the role. He was India's finest bowler during his time, because he never got the chance to play for India because, of course, by that time he was quite old. He was not
mhm,
when India became a test nation. But so this is a seminal work. I mean, like, this is a very path-breaking work, and it's almost a history of India rather than just a history of cricket, right? So this is something that I will definitely recommend. A Corner of a Foreign Field, and one book that I really like, and as a quizzer, I also refer to this while making questions at that one point of time. Is this book? This is the Picador Book of Cricket, which is edited by Mr. Ramchandra Guha, but it is contains essays from few of the best cricket writers around the world, like Sid Berry and John Arlott, Neville Carders, and this is a treasure trove of articles on cricket. So this is something that again I would definitely recommend. One book that I'm reading right now is a book by again two cricket fans, very senior cricket fans who have had the privilege of meeting. This is Mid Wicket Tales by S. Giridhar and Vijay Raghunath. It is again a collection of essays on cricket, not just Indian cricket. So this is something that I would definitely recommend. I'm thoroughly enjoying reading this book. This is an updated version. So it was released, I think, in 2014, but this year they have, or end of last year, they had come up with a revised version. So this is something that I would recommend. Coming apart from Indian cricket, the most fascinating work on cricket that have come up in recent times, which I would definitely recommend to all the viewers of this podcast, is this. I'm almost through with this book. This is called Unveiling Jazba. This is by right now a Bangalore-based journalist called Ayush Putran. Uh, who has written this book on the history of Pakistan women's cricket,
mhm,
which is fascinating. The amount of struggles that it took to put up a team on the field, uh, not just develop the team, just putting up 11 players to represent the country in women's cricket
mhm,
is fascinating. And it is almost shocking the amount of struggle that they have gone through.
Right.
And fact that it has been written by an Indian,
Mm,
who has never visited Pakistan, makes this book all the more remarkable.
mm,
And the amount of research that has gone into it, and you know, uh, the power of the writing is fantastic. So, Unveiling Jazba by Ayush Putran is another book that I would definitely recommend. So, these are a few recommendations from my side.
mm,
In terms of knowing about the history of Indian cricket, uh, there's a compilation edited by Boria Mojumdar, which basically has all the articles of Indian sport from the Times of India from 1875 onward. So that's another publication that we refer to. And for a simple, nice, uh, quick read about Indian cricket history, another book that I would recommend is Boria Mojumdar's Illustrated History of Indian Cricket. I think that is a very fast read. It has got lovely pictures and gives you a quick reference to all
mm,
significant stages of Indian cricket per se. So these are the few of the books that I would recommend. In terms of literature, one small thing that I would like to point out, which is slightly negative, especially with respect to Indian cricket, is the uh, plethora, or I would say crowding of uh, you know autobiographies and biographies that are coming out,
mhm,
especially biographies. There are so many books on the same cricketers. If you see, for example, like we have written the book, so we constantly look at the Amazon charts of how book is doing. We constantly see on the charts like there are so many books on the same cricketer. You
mm,
know,
mhm, mm,
and I would hope that some of the best cricket writers in the country actually explore other subjects rather than the same top name cricketers again and again. That's not a criticism per se. I know it's very fascinating to know about these big stars, but
mhm,
some subjects, for example, there should be more literature on women's cricket. I feel in India, you
mm,
know, there have been, of course, the recent times there have been a couple of books that have come up, like Create, and I think The Fire Burns Blue, if I'm not wrong. Few books have been written, but I would like to have something on the older part of Indian women's cricket. Like, of course, we have covered a little bit, but probably in the 1970s when the Shanta Rangaswamy and Dan
mm,
Adilji's first came
mm,
into prominence. So
right,
yeah,
right, right.
so so this is my perspective on cricket literature in India. But overall, yes, of course, there are some great works, and a lot of authors are doing an incredible job, and even not just in terms of books, even the articles that you read on various platforms. Whether it's Stricken for CRICIQ, also on the various newspapers, is fascinating. And we are very lucky that we have a sport which allows so
Mm,
much research, so much statistics, so many emotions come through. So cricket is a very literature friendly sport, you could
mm,
say. It's a statistics friendly sport as well as a literature friendly sport, because so much can be written about it. So much happens in a particular match. Every ball is a moment. You know,
right.
which you cannot talk about football, because football. Uh, so you talk about moments where somebody dribbled, but you don't have that particular. Apart from the goals, you cannot point to anything
Mm,
specific always. But in cricket, every ball it says that something happened. The score moved ahead. Let's say. So we are very lucky as cricket followers that we follow such a sport which is so rich.
true. Fascinating, Titash. I think it's been a learning for me to hear you and learn more about Indian cricket, and I'm sure that my audience has also been able to learn a lot from you, and I'll definitely link the book that you have from Amazon link to the description of this video so that people can go and look forward to buy that book. And thank you so much, Titash, for being here and giving us your valuable time. And we hope to have you for another podcast someday on some other topic.
Thank you so much, Siddharth, and it was a pleasure being here. And thanks for your great question this time.
Thank you. And thank you to my audience. And till the next time, bye.
Bye bye.